Hello, this is Paul from Montana, and if you're watching this, you're interested in Yamaha Wave Venture wave runner. This machine is a 1996 Yamaha Wave Venture 1100 two-stroke. I blew the engine in it last year, and I decided to fix it because it's a pretty cool wave runner. I really like it. It's fast, it's easy to work on, engine's simple. Lots of power. It's worth fixing. It's a lot of fun. So I just decided to do this video to hopefully to help other people out who want to do a similar project. And this is stuff I really like to do. I'm not a mechanic, so I mean, take it or leave it what I say, but this is just to kind of help you out. And so here we go. Okay. The problem with this engine was, obviously, it blew a piston. This is the first piston on the machine closest to the front. I think it would be number 1. Skirt broke off. This side actually has a crack in it. You probably can't see it on the video, but it's probably got a lot of hours on it. I have no idea how many hours it has because it was the instrumentation panel screen, the gauge cluster screen is broken, but anyhow, it just probably had a lot of hours on it, and decided to give up. So I decided to rebuild it, and here's kind of how it went. I emptied out the hull here. I took all the parts out of it because I wanted to just do a really thorough job, get everything perfectly clean, inspect everything, and it's kind of fun to really understand how it's put together too by taking it all apart. To get the engine out of the machine, you can probably do it without taking, the hood assembly off it, and you could probably leave the fuel tank in it, but like I said, I just want to tear everything apart and just make it a real thorough kind of job. The first thing you have to do when you remove the engine from this machine is take the exhaust off of it. And you can see here's where the exhaust went into the rear end of the machine in this rubber hose here. And this is the exhaust line on the table here. I've got it split apart because I wanted to inspect the inside of it and make sure nothing was stuck in there or whatever. And I cleaned the carbon out real good. So it's when I put it back together, I'll put new gaskets on there and get it all sealed back together. So when you take this out, obviously just label hoses and anything that you need to label where they go. I don't have these labeled, but I have it written down as to where they go in the engine. It's real important to label everything. Everything inside the hull here, you can see there's either plastic bags or these vinyl gloves that have notes in them that say where things go to. I like to label everything very thoroughly because it just reassembly is so much easier when you do that. It might take you an extra hour writing notes and stuff, but man, it sure helps you through it when you put it back together. So okay, back to getting the engine out. You take the exhaust off it and all the hoses that go to the exhaust, of course. The front bolts are kind of hard to get at, so I actually took the hood, unbolted it, and the 4 bolts that hold it down, I lifted it and pulled it to the right side. I guess that starboard side, and I released the 2 straps on the fuel tank, kind of lifted that and get it a little bit out of the way, and I was able to access the front of the engine right here to get the bolts off the exhaust. They're really hard to get at with all that stuff in the way. And then you also want to take the carburetors off. These are a little tricky to get off. It's not really a fun project. You got to really just kind of take your time. But on top of here is an assembly. It's like a flash suppressor assembly. Remove all the stuff off the top of it and the plastic housing that's on there, and then you'll be able to see these 6 bolts that are on the bottom here that bolt it to the intake reed valve assembly. And it's hard to do inside the hull. You have to position a wrench in this crack right here and just work them off, a quarter turn at a time till you get them off there. It'll probably take you a half hour, but just take a deep breath and just do it. So then you get the carburetor assembly off and any fuel lines or anything related to it, and you label everything the best that you can so that you'll understand how it goes back together. Electrical, any kind of electrical stuff that comes from the battery or anywhere, you know, unhook those from the starter and the ground and stuff, and just label it real good so you know how it goes back together. This is a sump filter right here. It actually hooks up to a hose back here that sucks water or anything out of the bottom of this machine, you know, and puts it out the back end. Clean that real good before you put it back on there. Here's the outdrive to the jet. I'd recommend taking that off and making sure the bearings are good and tight, and then put it back on, and of course grease it before you run it. Here's the engine mounts off the bottom of the engine. I took them off, left the bolts in there so that they're easy to put back in place when I get the crankcase put back together. So when you take it out, of course, everything's all bolted. These are still bolted to the bottom of the crankcase. The engine is basically still assembled, you know, the head and the cylinder head and the head, and everything's still together. But you take these 4 bolts off these isolators, leave these in the machine, take these 4 bolts off and lift the engine up out of there. If you undo these 2 bolts on all 4 isolators and try to bring these out with the machine, I mean with the engine, you'll have trouble. There's not enough room to do that. So don't try it. You'll have to put it sideways and do all kinds of crazy stuff. I tried it, and yeah, it doesn't work. So on to engine parts here. Obviously here's the failure mode that started this all. Now if you see that or suspect that, you know, you have a piston that looks like that, you can't just pull the top end off the machine and rebuild it. That would be awesome. I mean, that's pretty easy to do, but you have to take the crankcase out because there's pieces that end up in here and they get pulled through the crankcase by the counterweights or whatever these are called, and you might have a crack. Well, you can see it's all marred up, but fortunately I did not have a crack. I inspected it really well and put some gas in here, let it soak for a few hours, and nothing leaked, so we're good to go. So you want to inspect everything. I have yet to clean off like the old case sealer that was on here, and I also have to clean some of it off the bearings here, where the case goes back together. This crankcase, this crank assembly here is actually in really good shape. I took the seals off, replaced the seals with brand new seals, grease them before you put them on there. There's 2 on this side, 1 on this side. Before I did that, however, I took this crank assembly to a transmission shop, and they hot tanked it and cleaned all the bearings and blew it out, and hopefully got all the aluminum chunks and everything out of the bearings that were present. When I got it home, I put a little bit of 2-cycle oil down in these bearings through the holes, and they are smooth and tight. Very, very good shape. I'm not worried about that. The rods also, all 3 of them are in good shape. When you pull up and down on them, all 3 of them, there's no play at all. There's play front to back. I guess you call that longitudinal play or something. But all engine rods are going to have that. I mean, I think the spec for this machine is 80 thousandths, and these don't move 80 thousandths. I didn't put a indicator on them to find that out, but I can tell you they're pretty tight. I do a fair amount of machine work, and these aren't moving 80 thousandths. They're probably less than 50 actually, just going by feel. If you want to do it the right way, you would actually measure that and verify that these are within spec, but I'm pretty sure they're good to go. The top end too, I put my new bearings and wrist pin in here, and they're just extremely tight, so I think this whole crank assembly is in good shape. Now, when you put the crank back together, this is how I did it. I built a little wood fixture, and you put the top of the crankcase on there, so it's basically upside down. And then you set the crank in there so the rods go down through these 3 holes, and then you align the bearings up with the alignment pins, The reason for the alignment pins is so that oil can travel into the bearings through these ports. And obviously you won't be able to get the halves to go together unless that's done properly. It's not that hard to do. You just take your time and make sure the seals are seated properly. Don't put the seals on backwards. There's a certain way to put them on, and you'll know when they line up with these where they seat on this thing. So, and then you put some goop on here, case sealer. I like the really good aircraft grade stuff you get at Napa. I don't know what it's called, but it's like molasses and glue. It's really good stuff. Put it together, torque it down. Get a manual before you do this job too. I had a Tech Spark manual that I got off eBay, and it's pretty detailed. It has, just about everything you need to know if you're somewhat mechanically inclined. Like I said, I'm not a mechanic. I don't do this stuff all the time, but I enjoy it, and if I read the manual, I can, visualize it and figure stuff out. So you torque all this stuff back together, flip it over, and then you go into the further assembly, which I think I'm going to explain in another video. This first video is just kind of show all the parts and what came out of the machine and what I'm trying to do. Second video will be more parts that go into it and why I chose certain parts and what I think is going to work to get it back to 100%. And then I'm going to do a third video, hopefully when I get it all running and put back together. So these cylinders were bored out 20 thousandths. That's a 0.5 millimeter. I brought it to a shop and they did that for me, and then when they know how far it had to get bored out, I ordered a piston kit for it to size, and then they do piston to wall clearance with like a honing process. I had the head flattened too, which I don't know if that's really necessary, but it wasn't that expensive, and I just thought it was good insurance after putting all this work into it to make sure it's flat. Carburetors, I bought Mikuni carburetor kits for this. I'm going to replace all the needle valves and seats and all the parts internal that are replaceable. Clean them really, really well, put them back together, and then set pop-off pressure to about 32 psi. Try to get it the same on all three carburetors, and then do all the settings as prescribed by the manual that I have for air mixture and all that. You wouldn't want to do a big rebuild like this and just go, well, it ran good, so I'm just going to put the carburetors back on. No, you got to rebuild them, because this could have been what killed the engine. Like I said, with this one, I doubt it. I think it was old age, but a lean carburetor, too much oil, not enough oil can obviously damage a two-stroke very fast. So you want to make sure your carburetors are pristine. And coincidentally, I'm going to remove the oil system. Here's the drive right here, and on the reverse side is an oil pump, and you remove the oil pump, put a cap over it, take the tank off, take all the hosing out, and just run mixed gas. So I'll be running like 32 to 1 to break it in, and then probably 40 or 50 to 1 mixed gas once I get it all put together. I just don't want to risk it. The oil system was kind of leaky on this thing, and for all I know that had something to do with why it blew up. So I just want to get away from that and just make sure it's good to go. The reed valve assembly, I inspected all the reeds. I don't see any sign of damage or fraying or cracking. They look good. So I'm just going to clean it up real good, all new gaskets. And obviously I bought all the gasket set for this, which I'll explain in the next video that I do. As far as this hood assembly goes, like I said, I took it off to just do a thorough job. It's probably not necessary, but it sure made it a lot easier, a lot of room to work with, and it wasn't too hard to get off there. Maybe an hour or something to get it off there. This is a box of parts. Like I said, everything's labeled really, really thoroughly. I redid this old Honda motorcycle, not the little one, that's my kid's bike. And I had this thing torn down to nothing. Literally the engine, everything was taken apart. The engine, crankcase, everything. And I labeled all the parts, and 6 months went by, and I put it back together, and I didn't have any problems because I just did a good job labeling it. So anyhow, that's the first video installment of this rebuild, and I hope it helps you, and we'll go on to the next video. Thanks.